Hey everyone, happy Coalesce. Let's get started. Come here, Jerry. We can hang out. If you're not sure if you're in the right place, this is the talk where we go through and tell you about all the cool stuff that we shipped over the last year. My name is Greg. I'm a product manager here at DBT. I focus on developer experience, so primarily the IDE, the Cloud CLI that you heard us launch earlier today, and some other unreleased goodies that we'll tease at the end here. This is the legendary Jericho, Jeremy Cohen. Jeremy is probably the closest thing I've ever seen to an analytics rock star, though I'm relatively new to the analytics space, so maybe there are others out there. He also comes to us from a pseudo rock star tour. He was in Sweden, I think, 2 days ago, and France before that, so definitely on the move. And DBT is actually a fully remote company. So I joined DBT probably 3 months ago. This is the first time that Jeremy and I have met in person. And so last night we were up and we were talking and we were saying, you know, what should we do for this talk we have together, getting to know each other. And we were telling each other stories and discussing what I guess both of our therapists would refer to as thrill-seeking behavior. And we said, well, one thing we could do, we could put up slides up here, right? Yawn, snooze town, boring. Another thing we could do is we could pre-record a demo. Seen some of that, but you know, wasn't super exciting. And I turned to Jeremy and I said, Jeremy, you know what I love about us? We don't play by the rules. We don't talk an equal amount during our introduction. We should do something really wild. And Jeremy looked back at me and said, what's more wild than live demoing beta software? So are you all ready for some live demos? All right. Jeremy, and if you have all thought of anything more wild than live demoing beta software, keep it to yourself. It's a work of it. All right, Jeremy. Oh, you really are in the dark over there. All right. I would like you to raise your right hand, put your left hand on top of the laptop, and repeat after me. I, Jeremy Cohen, solemnly swear that I have not touched this laptop ever in my life, except for right now with my hand on it, and the 15 minutes of prep we did in front of everyone. Cool. All right. So we're going to take you on a little bit of a journey of what it's now like to be a developer in DBT Cloud. We're going to start off with the Cloud IDE and walk you through some experiences we've built there. Then we're going to go over and shift to the Cloud CLI and show you how some of the improvements we've made in the IDE flow through to the CLI. And then, like I promised at the end, we're going to tease a little bit of some stuff that we're building in the future. Sound good? Cool. All right. So to kick it off, Jeremy is inside of a DBT project. And one interesting thing here is that this is a new project, and we will make it so by deleting that dbtpackages.yaml folder right there. And when we do that, if you notice, first we go to an error state, and in the bottom right we have this new installing state. And what does that mean? We're running DBT tabs automatically for you, so you don't have to do this every time you open the IDE anymore. And this is something that's not true just in the IDE, it's also true in the Cloud CLI, which we'll show you a little bit later. But this is a theme that you'll sort of see here throughout this talk, is we're taking these little pain points that make your experience with DBT not optimal, and turning them into opportunities to show you something delightful or cool or interesting. So this is actually true in all versions of DBT in the IDE now. We'll automatically install deps for you. In 1.6, the only case where you'll still need to run DBT deps is if you go and manually edit the dependencies.yaml to add a new package or to update a version or something like that. But the initial experience is this just runs for you and just works out of the box. So these are the kind of things you'll see over the next 23 minutes or so, but let's move on. So as I mentioned, I joined DBT about 3 months ago now. And the first thing you do as a new product manager is you go and talk to customers, right? You go and you sit down and you say, hey, what do you like about this? What do you not like? What's working well for you? What's not? And that's usually really good because you get this diverse perspective. You kind of talk to a lot of different customers, large to small, hear about all the different problems they're having. That was not exactly the experience I have with the IDE. I think one thing that happened for me was it got to the point where on the ride out here when I fell asleep on the plane, the guy who was next to me nudged me and was like, you just keep muttering about how slow DBT parses in the IDE for some reason. And I was like, yeah, this is the bane of my existence. And so we have some work here that we're still working on to improve the performance of the IDE and get parse up to snuff, really. But we've also made some smaller quality of life adjustments here that can help you today. And so Jeremy, if you can, kick off a parse. So Jeremy saves the file here, which is going to kick off a parse. You can see that it's parsing, but the IDE is still ready. The IDE is still ready. Yeah, this is the problem with live demos. We're good? And so Jeremy was able there to go ahead and run a dbt build while the parse. Do it one more time because I messed up the talk track for this. So if you go ahead and save, we will be parsing, but the command bar is still available, and you can also run a compile. And what we're doing here behind the scenes is queuing the command that you actually gave to the IDE behind the parse. So we'll reuse that same parse, but you no longer have to wait and kind of sit here pondering your life's existence while the parse actually runs, and you can walk away and do something else. This is particularly helpful for larger projects where parse can take a long time. And then that is behind parse also just getting better in the long run and becoming faster. And so we shipped these two features in I think the last 2 weeks, right? We only worked on them for 2 weeks. And I tell you that because we spent a lot of time where you didn't hear very much from the IDE team earlier this year. And a big reason for that was that we were shifting to a new backend. It's our second new backend, but the point of this was to let us build features faster and really have a parity between what you can run in dbt core and what you can run inside of the IDE. So I want to show off another feature that's only possible because of our new IDE backend, and that's interactive show and compile and support for the, I don't know how to say this verbally, but this in curly braces. So the reference to the current model. So this is something, you've probably seen a model like this before, going ahead and defining an incremental materialization, and then we have this filter statement that tells us which rows are actually going to be materialized into the model. A lot of inline queries. And so from this model, we're going to set this up so that there's actually an error within it, so we can see that when we run in the past, we would not have caught this error. And the reason for that is because the invocation of show or compile that was being run didn't actually know about the model state. It thought it was running basically its own independent query. And you would see if you ran dbt build, you would see an error from this model, but you wouldn't see it on show or compile. And so now, what we've done with the new backend is we are able to resolve both the isIncremental hook there, the built-in, and also this, so that it prints out what it actually is, because it's aware of its own model. So this is, again, a smaller quality of life win. It lets you not have to go to a CI build or run dbt build to actually see the failure here. But again, something that was made possible by several months of work in the back. Cool. And the other great thing about this backend is now anything you can do in core, you can do in dbt Cloud as well. So there were commands that weren't supported before. So Jeremy, if you run like a dbt ls, for example, just works, right? And the reason for this is we now have parity across the two. All right. So now one last feature that I want to talk a little bit about. We've seen how the IDE can do everything we can do in core now. But what can the IDE do that core can't do? And so I don't know if any of you have been eyeing that defer to production toggle in the lower right. But let's get a model queued up here that we want to build. And let's remember that in this world, we haven't touched this environment before. So we have a totally clean dev schema in our backend. And when we go and try and build that model, it's going to fail, right? And it's going to fail because we don't have the other models accessible to it. So what we can do instead is we can build everything into our schema. And this is going to take like 25 or so seconds because it's a demo project, but it could be significantly longer, right? This is a good time to go like check your favorite meme channel normally. Sorry to be taking this away, but what if there was a better way to do this? So what we'll do once this finishes is we'll go back and we'll drop our schema. Do we have Snowflake open? Is that easy to do? This is why he's the rock star, folks. All right, so I've now learned the slickest way to drop your schema via dbt in the IDE. And now we're good. So our schema is cleaned up. So let's say we don't want to do that full build, right? We don't want to have to build every single model into our local dev schema to be able to run, and to save us time and money in Snowflake. So let's flip that defer to production toggle down in the lower right. And so what this is going to do is it's going to prefer, so we will always prefer your local dev schema, any models in your local dev schema, but if the models don't exist there, it's going to take the models that are in your upstream production environment and use those instead. So your builds get faster. That build that took 27 seconds will take significantly less time. And they'll also save you money, obviously, because you don't have to go out and rematerialize all these underlying rows. So there we go. Significantly faster. Cool. And let's talk about a few more things that the IDE can do best. So we're in a mesh project right now. So this project contains references to models that are not in the local project. And so in the IDE itself, we're able to drop in autocomplete for referencing to those, including different model versions. So if we ref out to the customer's model, which is elsewhere, it autocompletes. Amazing. And the last piece to talk about here is we added earlier this year support for linting. So you can actually go through, and as Jeremy edits this, if Jeremy has made any malformed indentations, which I think is anathema to Jeremy's entire being, but he can go through and run lint and get output here from the IDE. There's also formatting with SQL format. This can run off of SQL fluff file that you define yourself in your project, or use any of the other linters that we support. Cool. All right, so that about covers it for the IDE. I'm going to tell you all a little bit of a secret. All PMs are pretty self-conscious that we're not technical enough. So I'm just enough of an engineer to be dangerous. My personal claim to fame is that I worked at Cloudflare before working at dbt, and I pushed through a one-line change without a code review that broke all deploys at Cloudflare for like 3 hours. And we were in the meeting after. My favorite part of the retro of that was when the engineers on my team looked at me and said, "This isn't your fault, it's a process failure, but never do that again." And so I still have a chip on my shoulder from this. And what this means is that I really like developing at the command line, because then I can hop in and feel like I am an engineer too. And so no matter where you're developing, dbt Cloud is the best platform for running with dbt, because you get access to things like Explorer, you get to centralize all of your credentials, you get a better developer experience for the reasons we just saw, and many more coming. So there's this other new button in the cloud platform now. Try the Cloud CLI. So to install the Cloud CLI, it's a little bit simpler than running with dbt. So we can show you how to do this with we're on a Mac here, so we'll do this with Brew. So go ahead and copy those install instructions. The Wi-Fi here is a little slow, which is one of the things we were debugging before. So if it actually takes a little while, that is why. So we're going to go ahead and do a Brew install and get dbt installed. There's one other step that I need to do here in order to connect my local CLI with the cloud platform, and that is to go ahead and download a credentials file that contains my cloud account API key and some information about projects. That credentials file is pre-configured with the current project that you're in, so by default it will activate that project and make that one the one where you're deploying your Cloud CLI builds to. Cloud CLI only interacts with your development environment today. We're working feverishly on supporting production environments and other pieces as well. So we're now running with dbt cloud. And so it's possible for Jericho to issue any command that he wants. Like dbt list is fine. I would love a compile. And you can see the sending project to dbt cloud piece. Oh, we have to activate the project. Sorry. Cool. And so now when Jericho runs dbt list, wait for a response. This is a good time to mention that we're in beta, so performance is always improving. Right now, what we actually do under the hood when we're running these commands is we're actually sending up your local file system state to dbt. And so in the future, we will do a better version of that that requires less state to be sent. And so that's a big part of the kind of latency you're seeing there. But we've successfully run our dbt model on dbt cloud, or our dbt command in this case. And then if we run list on transactions, we get back all of our state as well. Cool. So it works, which is good. I think I would be fired if it didn't work there. So I know what you all are thinking. This brew install thing is very cool, but I love pip. I love my abusive relationship with pip. Pip hates me, and that only makes me love it more. So let's go back and try installing the CLI with Python. So run that pip install dbt command. And we recommend you do this inside of a virtual environment. The main reason for that is because this CLI tool is also named dbt, so they will conflict if you have both the Cloud CLI installed and the dbt core CLI installed. And so the best way to handle this is to have it in a virtual env. If you like messing around with your path environment variables, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But a really easy way to have both active at once is to have a virtual env for dbt core and have a different virtual env for dbt cloud. We also offer the CLI as a native executable for Windows or for Linux. I think the one way I saw some of the smartest engineers I know start to cry was to make them configure environment variables for Windows with various permissions set. But again, we offer the executable there. And then Jericho, if we have that installed, another dbt compile, and we should be up and running. Cool. And the other great piece about running with the Cloud CLI that we sort of mentioned before, everything in cloud just works, right? So this is the same project we had before. We had cross-project refs. We were using mesh. All of that works, right? We never ran deps here, right? So from the second we installed, we never ran deps. That automatically works, again, same way it does in the IDE. We have several ideas for things we can build here in the future. We're thinking about how to get to a place where core is versionless, and you're able to actually run different versions of dbt without changing any configuration or doing anything here, and kind of getting seamless upgrades between your versions without breaking changes. So there's a lot of cool stuff that can come because we have this one unified development platform now. The last piece that I didn't mention here is around defer to prod. So the ability to defer your builds to the production environment we showed in the IDE also works by default in the CLI. So when Jeremy goes and builds, we're going to automatically take any of the models that were not in that local schema and defer them. OK, cool. So one thing we noticed when we did that compile is that last sentence, artifacts have been downloaded. So you still get all of the artifacts, the manifest, et cetera, downloaded locally at the end of every dbt run. And this is cool because it means that you can script, right? So the same way you would script with dbt core, the same way you might invoke a pre-commit hook, you can do that with the Cloud CLI. And so I think what we can show here, Jericho, is if you want to hop in to a code space, we did touch the code space before here. So once we resume that, we're back in our project again inside of a code space. And now, Jericho, I don't actually know what you have planned for us here. But we can show off our ability to invoke the Cloud CLI and grab artifacts out from one of our dev builds at the command line. And again, this is something that we'll expand out over time to support other pieces of the platform. So the Cloud CLI is going to be the way to interact with various dbt Cloud APIs. So whether that's listing out your users, listing out connections and environments, et cetera, and kind of getting all the information about dbt Cloud. Yeah, so we can show deferral again for the command line while we let the code space run. Is your schema cleared out? Did you do the trick again? Cool. And while Jericho is doing this, I might start to tease the last thing we'll show, because we're running a little tight. So as the code space kind of cooks up there, I mentioned that this Cloud CLI is the way to interact with all of the different cloud APIs going forward. A lot of those are not built yet. One of the more exciting ones that we've built out is the semantic layer. So you can invoke the semantic layer from the Cloud CLI today and go through and run your queries, list out queries, et cetera, all from the command line. And the Cloud CLI being the tool that sort of wraps that and gives you the same authentication experience, the same centralized control of your environment and your database connection credentials, all of that being still in the Cloud CLI. Cool, so we are back in our code space, and we are running with the same Cloud CLI. We've already run through the install steps here. We just downloaded our credential file and installed using the pip install method. But once again, I'm up and running and outputting artifacts, et cetera, from dbt. Cool. And I think you're going to do a little pre-commit hook here. Let's do it. Do you want to do semantic layer first, Jericho? Let's do it. All right, so this is the semantic layer running inside of a code space. And again, this is something that hasn't really been possible with dbt Cloud before. If you wanted a script like this, you would have had to be in dbt core. But now you can run your builds in a centralized way and access all of the power of the cloud platform from the command line. So Jericho is going to issue a semantic layer query here. And that's going to run, except that the underlying schema does not exist. Live demos. Isn't this a fun journey we're on together? I think this is probably the best way I could have stress tested Jeremy. Cool. Yeah, deferral still works. And we've heard a lot about deferral today. Even if you were at the talk just before, we talked a little bit about deferral within CI to a specific environment. It's a really big feature for us because it lets you both save money and get increased performance. There are other angles we think in the future to kind of tackle similar things to deferral in cloud. But it's a great way of seeing how cloud can give you really reasonable default opinions based on having access to all of the metadata that we have about your underlying project. Cool. Did that semantic layer query run? I wasn't paying attention. Jeremy, you don't have to apologize for anything. Cool. Cool, so we should be reset there. We can talk about reattach a little bit too. So while Jeremy does this, one additional feature in the Cloud CLI is your ability to start a build and then detach from the build and have the build continue running in the background. If you notice quickly while Jeremy was running through, there was that reattach command that lets you kick off a job on a dev job on dbt Cloud, and then return to it later. All right. So this should work. Round of applause for Jeremy, the best live debugger I've ever met. Cool. And so there's the semantic layer running inside of code spaces. All right. So I want to talk a little bit as well about what's coming in the future. We showed deferral, right? Jeremy, did I get your whole hit list? I wanted to do scripting. All right, let's do scripting. So the ability to have a custom Git hook before or after something executes. There we go. What does your awesome script do? Where is that? Oh, there we go. Yeah. So going through and reading the manifest and giving your models some sort of complex, it seems like. All right, cool. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming in the future and kind of the architecture that we've built here. So one big thing that we've heard from a lot of you is that the CLI is great because it lets you use VS Code in tandem with the Cloud CLI. That's something we're definitely thinking a lot about. And if you have thoughts there or things that you would like to see, come talk to me after. There's also the ability to integrate with other parts of dbt Cloud. So we've thought a lot about Explorer integrations, Explorer for dev builds, the ability to see where an individual dev build is and the test that it's passed and giving you feedback and information on that in whatever Git provider you're using. Another feature, unit testing, right? So the ability to take these dbt core features and make them better in Cloud and then make that experience available across all of the different ways you interact with Cloud now. So IDE and as well as the Cloud CLI. So that is all we have for you. To wrap up everything we showed you here today, we showed you the IDE, right? We showed you the ability to not have to run deps anymore there. We showed you our new little parse feature that lets you defer commands while a parse is running, or queue commands while a parse is running, I should say. We showed off defer to prod across a few different tools, both in the IDE and the Cloud CLI. Then we switched gears. We talked a little bit about the Cloud CLI itself. Showed you how to install that either with brew or pip. Talked about how there's a namespace conflict there between dbt core and Cloud and kind of best practices for handling that. And then we talked about how the Cloud CLI gives you access to all of the power of dbt Cloud. So mesh, semantic layer, defer to prod, lack of having to run deps. I could go on. And then from there, we talked a little bit about the future. So I'd like to thank you all and thank Jeremy especially for sweating through an incredible live demo, if I don't say so myself. And have a great Coalesce, everyone. Thanks.